Hey guys, Natalie Forster here, integrative dietitian and owner of Revived Roots. We are a science-based wellness company empowering people with holistic nutrition and lifestyle tools so that they or you can live the most meaningful, fulfilling, and healthy life possible. So today's training topic is all about stress. From my perspective, this is the absolute root of all dysfunction. So when we have dis-ease in the body or unpleasant symptoms, one of the best things that we can do is to really tune into the body's stress response and start to modify how we're responding to things to ultimately reduce that response and bring the body back into a state of homeostasis. So no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's an autoimmune condition or something that's unidentified, you want to first and foremost always, always, always tune into your body's stress response, your environment, and see what you can do to make adaptations there. Okay. So stress, we want to talk about, what is stress? What does it look like in the body, right? How does it present itself both physically as well as physiologically? And how do you identify it, right? Like what are some tools to actually identify it? And then the most effective line of defense for actually protecting your body from the overstimulation of the HPA axis. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that is too. So stress, it is a very normal response in the body. It is why you are still alive today, likely, right? It is something that really triggers the survival response in the body and puts us into a state where we are hyper aware and we can respond to a situation or a threat by either fighting or fleeing the situation. Now, something to take note of is that the body is not able to really identify or discern what the cause of the stress is. So it could be something like having sleep deprivation, right? Or it could be a chemical exposure to a pesticide, an herbicide, or cleaning chemicals, or substances like drugs or alcohol. It could be emotional distress. So the feelings of loneliness or fear or anger or guilt. It could be mental distress, right? Mental being like worrying or anxiousness, or something spiritually oriented if you have troubled relationships or career financial pressures, right? All of these stressors, right? The body's going to respond in the same way. It's either going to be, here's a sympathetic nervous system response, aka fight or flight, or it's going to be that parasympathetic response where we're able to feel calm and safe and to really mellow out, right? Now, when we have any of those triggers, which are more modern day stressors, the body can identify that it's not an actual tiger. It's not an actual physical threat. It's just going to respond in the same way. And so that physiological response is that the blood pressure will rise, right? So if you're someone who deals with high blood pressure a lot, you might want to tune into this episode of training today. But your blood sugar will also go up, right, for quick active energy. You'll also see that the digestive system shuts down, right? When we are in that state of surviving and protecting ourselves, the body is not concerned with digestion. It's just absolutely not at the forefront of importance, right? It's not a priority. And you'll also see that at this time, blood is going to shunt away from major organ systems. So generally everything is not functioning optimally because we were in that state of survival, right? Now, when we look at it and how it expresses itself, right, that's the physiological aspect, but there's also the physical component to tell when the body's in a stress response. So what you'll often see is that the shoulders will come forward and that there will be an kind of like a folding forward to this really nice slouched position. Not only is this like, protection, think you have a shell on, that's a sign of being in that response, but it's also going to put compression on the lungs as well as on the GI, right? So when we have compression on the lungs and we need to breathe to shut down that sympathetic response, we don't actually have that room or that space or the capacity to breathe how we need to breathe. So you'll tend to see this. You'll also tend to see shoulders kind of glued up towards the ears, or seeing this, like, again, kind of frightened position. And so a lot of people who have, neck tension, right? They're like, I just always have neck tension and it's just so tight. That's kind of like a chronic state of stress in the physical form, right? So that's a way that it can present itself physically, okay? Now, whenever we want to identify if we're stressed, you can kind of go to that part, right? Physically, what's my posture look like? Great. Do I have an open chest? Am I sitting upright? Do I the capacity to expand my rib cage and my lungs can really expand and take in the level of oxygen that I need. That's one way to assess it. Secondly, it would just be to tune into how you're currently breathing at any given moment. So without making any major adjustments, like right now, you could simply tune in and just feel, what does your breath feel like? Is it short, shallow, and rapid? Or is it slow, deep, and voluminous, right? Which one are you? Likely, you're the very shallow, short, rapid breath, and you typically are only going to breathe up here into the upper regions of the lung. For the breath that we want to get to, it's going to be all about that lower expansion of the lungs and feeling it in the rib cage. So that's one way to kind of tune in and see where you are. The short, rapid, shallow breathing is definitely a sign of being in that stress response. You might even catch yourself not breathing, right? So if you think about, like, I've got a deadline and I'm working on a lot of things, and you're just going to be like, right? And like 2-3 minutes goes by and you're like, and you're just holding your breath. Okay, again, that is a stress response. So when we are in this in a chronic state, right, there are, again, benefits, one, for survival of having stress, but also you can use stress in controlled doses to kind of develop this hormetic benefit of what stress can do for you. However, we're not talking about hormesis right now. We're talking about the long-term detriments of chronic stress. And that's really not a controlled dose of stress. That's just like perpetual, ongoing, uncontrolled stress in the body. Okay. Yeah, definitely two different things there. So where do I go with this? So whenever we are, we tune in and we realize, like, oh, look, we are kind of stressed. The number one way, like, again, that best line of defense to protect yourself from overstimulation is to just come back to the breathing and to cultivate a different way of breathing. So what we're really going for is slow, deep, controlled, and even voluminous. So whenever you're breathing in such a way that you're going to shut off the stress response and turn on that parasympathetic response, again, rest, digest, reproduce, right? This is a healing state for the body. We want that breath to be slow, deep, controlled, and voluminous. So here's an example. Something else you want from a criteria perspective would be, you want that inhale to be at least 5 seconds, okay, at a minimum. So here's an example. Right? And then you repeat that. And so what I encourage you to do is to set timers throughout the day, right? To take that self-assessment, check your posture, tune into your breathing, and then set a timer. Maybe it's just a 2-minute timer, and you do that slow, deep breathing process, right? Again, at least 5 seconds. It might be a little bit uncomfortable and strange at first if this is something that you have not practiced, but after a couple of days, it becomes quite normal, and you'll realize that it's actually not that difficult to increase the capacity of your body, of your lungs' ability to breathe. So for instance, when I started doing this with my asthma, right, this is the thing that changed everything for me. So I used nutrition and lifestyle to help reduce inflammation. However, the retraining of my breathing pattern is the thing that liberated me from medication and really gave me my life back, right? It's what allowed me to take control, because I learned how to put my body back into that safe space so that it could actually heal and repair. I had spent 20 plus years in that sympathetic response, never having taken a deep breath in my life. So it's highly, highly effective. So when I started practicing this, it was very much like, right? Very disordered, very choppy. And I couldn't get, more than a 2 to 3 second inhale. That was just like max. Now, if I'm really consciously practicing, I can push it, past the 40-second line, maybe even longer. And so that's just a way to show you that you can really develop that capacity. It's a muscle, right? And you really, when you're breathing, you want that belly region to expand, not be constricted. You want it to expand. You want that expansion to move up into the rib cage and into the chest. And then as you exhale, you want to maintain that posture and then exhale while keeping the rib cage lifted, right? So this is just a little practice that you can do to kind of, overall start that process of building more resilience in your body when it comes to the stress response, okay? Now, a couple things that I want to point out here is that when we do have that, just stress generally, but again, we're talking about chronic stress. this is going to impact the HPA axis in the body, because this is the pathway that regulates all stress. So you have the hypothalamus, which is at the forefront of the brain, the pituitary gland that's right underneath it, and then the adrenal glands, which sit right on top of the kidneys. So whenever we have stress come in, right, again, it could be any of the things we discussed earlier, we're going to get a series of hormones secreted. Now, when chronic stress occurs, we're actually going to desensitize that whole pathway, and we get this overstimulation, excess cortisol, excess epinephrine, et cetera. Now, this is really important because the HPA axis is what can, well, it's what regulates not only the stress, but mood, digestion, immune function, okay, libido, metabolism, energy. So if you're someone who's dealing with low sex drive, right, really low energy, you're just like, gosh, I'm always tired, right? It can be other things too, but we're talking about stress, right? That it could be just, I'm gonna have this really stubborn weight, my metabolism just seems to be broken, can't quite figure it out, or I'm always kind of sick or under the weather, I'm just constantly getting, colds or whatnot, and I just don't feel optimal, or I've got really poor digestion, I bloat, I've got, pain, cramping, my bowel movements are abnormal, or I'm just really moody and irritable or anxious and depressed, right? All of these things are actually signs or, communication from the body that you're overstimulating that HPA axis. And now you've really desensitized that whole pathway. And this is kind of like the implications, right? Is that the body is no longer in that thrive state. It's now in that survive state. And that's really the most inconvenient truth that I can put out there. I think that term was coined by the School of Applied Functional Medicine. Tracy is the woman there. But really, she says, the inconvenient truth is that we cannot expect, outcomes of thriving, right? So like beautiful skin, high energy, great sleep, high like sex drive, amazing orgasms, right? Brilliant digestion. We cannot expect all of that when we are living in a survival response, right? So the inconvenient truth here is that if you have a lot of symptoms or signs of dysfunction, it's not because your body's broken, it's because your body's actually functioning exactly as it's designed to. And it's showing you that you are chronically in this state of survival and that we can't thrive in this state. It's not possible. It's not a thrive state, it's a survival state. And so to get all of the outcomes that you want, right, you really have got to train or transition your body to live primarily in that parasympathetic rest and digest response. So I hope this was informative for you. If you learned anything new or if you have any questions, just go ahead and drop it in the comment section below and I will surely get back to you. Otherwise, I will be here next week with a different topic, and I hope you guys all have a really beautiful week. Cheers.